your P's and Q's.
All right.
All right. All
Yes.
right.
Yes, sir.
Hey, one of the things that I really feel like is going on in the culture around us, in the big picture of our country, and really even our churches, it's affecting our churches, is the question: what do we know, and how do we know it? That's a real big question, and it's deeper than just a surface question of what's going on. You know, we see things on the news and we think, okay, is that what's going on? Because you can then go and you can, you can find on the internet people who think two completely different ways about any topic that you can imagine. And so one of the big questions that we have is, what do we know and how do we know? And I used to train over-the-road truck drivers. And so one of the things that we used to do with over-the-road truck drivers is I would hand them a map. And as people got kind of younger and younger, guys got used to technology. And so when you hand them a paper map, they kind of look at it like it's ancient Hebrew or Sanskrit. They just really don't know what to do with it because they're accustomed to, using their phone and plugging in the GPS and just making sure that, that's what they do. And so they don't really know kind of where they are. And so one of the things that you start with a new truck driver, because you don't want to go and try to make a U-turn in a semi. So you start with a trip plan and you say, okay, where are we? And so you look on the map and you say, okay, where are we in the world? And how do we go from this place to the place that we're taking the load? How do we go to where we're going to be? And so if you were going to go to North Carolina, you would maybe take the turnpike, 80 across to 76 or whatever it is, and then go down. You can go down that way. There's another way you can go through the middle of Ohio. It's more of a scenic route. And which way is better, and you start asking those kind of questions. But along the way, a good trainer, and my trainer, the guy that trained me, he would always look over at me and he would say, where are you? And what he was looking for is, what highway are you on? What direction are you going? What's the next town that you're going to hit? What's the mile marker on the highway? Because if you have an accident or something happens, that's the information that you need to communicate to someone who's going to come and help you. Where are you?
Right.
And we've lost that in modern culture in a lot of ways.
Yep.
We've lost a background understanding of God.
Yes.
And this is a result of big philosophical things that have happened in history. And I don't want to belabor it, but we have a hard time even thinking clearly about God. And so we're confused sometimes. And I think in this series that we've been talking about, going back to the beginning, it's a reminder of where we came from. And it's a reminder of who our God is. It's good, sound theology that we really do need today. And so one of the things that, here's a truck that he did not read his map correctly. And you see the sign on the right, it says 12 feet. And I can tell you right now, he's 13 feet, 6 inches tall.
Oh my goodness.
The people of Israel, as we go back in time and think about the people of Israel and some of the things that they are experiencing and going through, they were in slavery in Egypt for hundreds of years. And the Egyptians were trying to grind them down and just destroy their culture and influence them with other ideas about God. And so Moses, like we know where we're at in the Bible, Moses has brought these people from the Egyptian captivity into freedom, and they're over on the Sinai Peninsula, and he needs them to know who God is. And I think, man, this idea of going back to the beginning is important for the people of Israel, and it's important for us today. And one of the things about us today that we need to know as we talk about the days of creation, there's a way to understand the Bible that is better than just guessing. So there's a science to it, if you will. Now, that doesn't mean that there's no art to it, but we don't want to make it all science on one side and we're all art on the other, because then we can get wild interpretations of the Bible. And so we have to use good methodology to think about what the Bible meant to the original audience. What is Moses saying to those Jewish people on the side of the Red Sea 3,400 years ago? And
Sure.
how does it apply to them before we go to the next step and say, how does it apply to us? And so one of the things we're going to talk about the days of creation today. Thankfully, there's no controversy here whatsoever. Everybody agrees perfectly about when the days were and how God created everything from nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't we wish? That would be much more convenient. And one of the things, like, so we're transitioning to think about how we got here, and the introduction to this sermon's a little bit long, so just bear with me. In the mid 1600s, a man named Bishop Ussher used the genealogies in the Bible to estimate the age of the earth. He came up with a creation date of 4004 BC. Now, what he did was he took the Bible and he said, let's start with the Bible. And he looked at the begats. You know, this guy begat that guy and that guy begat that guy.
Yeah.
And he made some assumptions, and he calculated out that the age of the earth the earth was created 4,000 years before Christ. Some of the assumptions that he made, we know are incorrect, because in the genealogies of the Bible, you can often cite your grandfather or your great-grandfather or even your great-great-grandfather and you can call him your father because that's a legitimate ancestral way to refer to your ancestor. But that messes up your chronologies a little bit. So we know it's probably older than 4,000 years according to the internal genealogies in the scriptures, but we still have some questions. So in the 1600s, Bishop Ussher came up with this date, and so for a long time, that was the accepted norm. Okay, the earth is young because God created it. Okay, now I believe that God created everything from nothing. So 6 days, no problem. 6 days, young earth, no problem. However, in the 17 and 1800s, you had the work of Charles Lyell in geology and a man named Charles Darwin in biology. They had questions about the age of the earth. Now, Lyell and Darwin were looking for a way that natural causes could create everything that we see in the natural world. And so they looked at things like the Grand Canyon. Now, at the bottom of the Grand Canyon is the Colorado River. And so they said, okay, so this river carved out all of this dirt. How long would that take?
Wow.
And so they figured, okay, it must have taken millions and millions of years. Well, you're starting to see the problem, because all they're doing, they would not appeal to anything supernatural at all. They're looking for natural reasons or natural ways that we can see the world as it is today.
Yeah.
And then they looked at the layers and they said, these layers must have happened because oceans deposited dirt and sediment over and over and over millions and millions of years. Well, when we look at the days of creation in Genesis, how do we find millions and millions of years? Where do those millions of years come from, if they were there at all? And so this, in the 1800s, became a problem in biblical studies. How do we understand, how do we put science on one side and the Bible on the other? How do we put those two things together?
There.
Because it doesn't seem like they will mesh very well. Well, this conflict is out there. And the book of Genesis in this conflict leads to at least 4 different theories. And so I'm going to walk you through 3 of them, and then I'm going to teach one of them. But I want you to know that you can be a Christian and you can believe any of these 4 different options. Okay? Because what does it mean to be a Christian? To be a follower of Jesus Christ, who died on the cross for your sins, and you believe that. That means you are a follower of Jesus. And I've often used the analogy of a river. Like, there are deep parts in the river of Christianity that you must believe in. Is Jesus God? You must believe that to be a Christian. Did God create the heavens and the earth? You must believe that to be a Christian. You know, now you can debate how God created or how long God used to create. Those are issues that are in the shallower parts of the river. I like to make a joke, because when I was a kid growing up in the Baptist tradition, we had deep questions about theology, you know, things like, can women wear pants or makeup or speak in public, right? And so some of these things are shallow parts where believers of equal faith commitments can disagree and throw rocks at each other if they want. The shallow parts of the river are things that are negotiable. They're still inside Christianity. Maybe they're even distinct from the puddles on the shore, but they're not the core doctrines of Christianity. And so I'm going to talk about three, and then I'm going to teach from one perspective. How do we get these millions of years that science observes in the world around us to reconcile with the Bible? Well, the first one is called the gap theory. Some interpreters of the Bible believe that there's a gap of time between Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. So they say, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Pause. Insert millions and millions of years, and the earth was formless and void, and the Spirit of God hovered over the waters. So they see that there's this gap there. The problem, this was popularized by the old Scofield Reference Bible. So if you're a fan of the old Scofield, this was in there. This kind of got out in popular Christianity and became dogma, if you will. It was like, yep, gap theory, that's what happened. The problem with the gap theory is that there's nothing in the text itself that indicates a gap, okay? It's a way to bring science and the Bible together, but it doesn't just start with the Bible. Oh, that's Ruth Ann in the other room. I was hearing something, sorry. So one of my commentators here, a guy named Henry Blocher, he says this about the gap theory. He doesn't like it. He's not a fan. He says the verdict on the whole theory must be quite impossible. It draws no support from the text, but rather brings its own framework, digging its own imaginary gap between the two verses in order to get it set up. Okay, so Blocher is not a fan. So while it's possible to believe the gap theory, there isn't anything in the text that requires a gap. The second theory is something called the day-age theory. Now, the day-age theory look at the days of creation in Genesis and say, okay, how do we get millions and millions of years from the days in Genesis? And they say, well, with the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. So maybe those days are figures of speech that are longer than days. So maybe the first day lasts millions of years. Maybe the second day lasts millions of years. The weakness here again is that there's nothing in the text that indicates it's anything other than a day. The Hebrew word for day is the same word that we would use to describe a literal day that we just experienced today. When we talk about tomorrow, we're talking about a literal day, you know. Not to mention in the text, it says there was evening and there was morning, the first day, second day, third day, and so forth. So the day-age theory is something that Christians believe. It's okay to believe it if you're a Christian. However, its weakness is that there's nothing in the text itself to indicate that the days in Genesis are anything other than days. And so Blocher again comments, and he's not a fan of this one either. He says the theory of day eras does violence to the text with regard to the fourth day. Now, what he means here is on the first day, we know that light was created, and then on the fourth day, the sun was created. And so how do you have millions and millions of years between the creation of light and the creation of the sun? Now, the people who believe this theory have creative ways by which they say, this is what it is. The problem is that none of them come from the text. The problem is that none of the reasons that they believe what they believe are textual reasons for it. Now, I believe that God gave us the text. I believe that the text is the revelation from God of what he wants us to know and understand. And so we've gone through the gap theory, the day-age theory. Now this is going to be the young earth, the literal theory. Now I'm going to use the word literal, but then the theory that I'm going to teach you is also a literal theory. Beginning with the text, young earth creationism believes the earth was created in 6 literal days, somewhere around 10,000 years ago. Kind of a give or take, maybe 10,000, maybe a little bit longer. Now this theory doesn't care about science. It says, okay, we're trying to find these millions and millions of years to accommodate a gradual process of development in both creatures and geology. we're going to find other ways to explain those phenomena and still hold that the text is primary and that the earth is young. Okay, so the weakness here is that it might be pushing the text beyond its boundaries. Because when you start with the text, when you start with the Bible itself, you need to realize this is a work of literature. It's a literary masterpiece. Right. And so the weakness here is that it might be using what's called a wooden literalism. Okay? It would be as if you were reading a song and taking it literally. So let me give you an example. Do you remember in 1965, the Beatles released the album Help? I wasn't around then, but you probably remember the song. It goes like this: help, I need somebody. Help, not just anybody. Help, you know I need someone. Help. Now let me ask you this question. And I didn't sing it because I love you. All right, I don't sing very well. What is the author's intent of the song? Somebody on Sunday said to get your money. And I was like, yes, that's exactly the purpose of the song, is to get your money. It worked very well. It's about the song is singing about needing help in the form of emotional support from a good friend.
Right. And
so you don't want to take that song and push it beyond what its intended meaning is. If suppose I have a heart attack, I'm not going to have a heart attack. I just had my heart checked today. I'm fine. If I were to start singing that song, clutching my chest, what would you think to do? What's wrong with him? He's really wound up about the Beatles at this point. Would you call an ambulance? Hey, I think my pastor's having a heart attack. He's singing the Beatles and holding his chest. You wouldn't, because I would be misusing the song. I would be misusing the author's intent. If I was really having a heart attack, I would say, oh, and then I would say to someone probably locally, hey, please call 911 and send the ambulance to my house because I think I'm having a heart attack. Okay? That's how we would communicate a need for literal assistance. And so Blocher calls this young earth creationism. He calls it the literal interpretation. He says this: one must be sure that the text demands the literal interpretation. It must not be adopted out of loyalty to the past, out of sheer habit, or from a reflex hardening before the possible threat of apostasy. Now, when it comes to days of creation and when they were and how long they were, Christians of equal spiritual commitment disagree. And so because we're in the United Brethren denomination, we would say you can think something different about when the days of creation and the manner of God's creation, and that's okay. You're not forced to believe or confess a young earth creationism, and that's good. But how do we make sure that we are prioritizing the scriptures and understanding it carefully and correctly? The final option that I'm going to teach from today is called the framework theory. And the framework theory views the text as a logical rather than a chronological order. And so it does look at the days in some sense like a song or like a semi-poetic literature. And Moses isn't really concerned to answer the questions that we have from a historical perspective. I would imagine if you went to Moses and said, hey, Moses, can you tell me when the creation was? He would say, in the beginning. Didn't you read what I wrote? Well, yeah, but Moses, how does evolution work? And Moses would say, I don't know. You're going to have to go talk to Charles Darwin or somebody about that. Assuming that Charles made it to heaven, I don't know. We want to prioritize the text of Scripture. Now, it's important to realize at the outset that the framework theory doesn't resolve all the tension in our creation theories. It views the text of Genesis from a literary rather than from a historical perspective. Now, this is a strength because you can look at the days of creation in Genesis as a framework, as more of a poetry kind of a thing, and you can still believe that the earth is relatively young. You can also look at the text of Genesis as a framework and believe in something like theistic evolution. That is a possible option for the Christian. You can believe in now maybe you can't believe is the gap theory or the day-age theory. These questions are good questions. They're big questions, but God has a theological intention in the days of creation. So it's important to think about this. Now, the framework theory is not new. It's got ideas in the Middle Ages. It's got ideas similar to it in Augustine. But the important thing is to think about who is Moses talking to when he wrote it? Who is Moses dealing with right now? And so in the first movement of the text, the divine creator establishes the boundaries of creation. Take a look with me, if you would please, at Genesis chapter 1, verse 3. I'm going to read from I usually use the NIV in church because that's what most people use. I'm going to use the ESV today. And I'm going to also use my reading glasses because that's where we're at. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the day from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening and there was morning, a second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was, I can hear through the internets, good. It was good. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the third day. With the framework theory, we look to see what God is doing here, what God's doing in the text. On the first day, God creates the realm of light and darkness. And so remember, we're dealing with a logical, not necessarily a chronological order. And so God on the first day creates light and dark, and he draws their boundaries, and he says, this is how far the light goes. This is where the darkness lives. And what you see is this absolute mastery over creation. There's nothing, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and they were unformed and unfilled. Now we see God forming and filling everything. And so God said, and there was. There's no struggle. In other ancient mythology, scripture, I believe, is true. Okay, so this is the true story of creation. In other ancient stories about creation, what kinds of things do we have happen? We have gods who create lesser gods. We have gods who have to have intimate relationships in order to create things. We have gods who fight. We have gods who die. Does your God do any of those things? Does your God need any of those things? He just says, okay, let's have some light. And there's light because God is the absolute master of creation. God evaluates. He says, this is good. This is good. And so it's important to understand that what God is doing here, as he's creating, he speaks things into existence, he evaluates it, and he sees that it's good. He separates, he creates the boundaries, and he names what he owns. God says that's going to be called day. This is going to be called night. When you name something, you own it. Suppose my brother was to come to my house, and my dog, I have a German Shepherd, her name is Addie. She's actually right over that shoulder in the hallway, guarding me. If my brother Guy comes to my house and says, hey, Gretchen, you know what Addie's going to do? Nothing. Because I named her Addie. She's my dog. She knows who she is. God names day and night because it belongs to him. In the second day of creation, God separates the sea and the sky. The waters above, where the rain comes from, the waters below are separated by the sky and created by God. Now, you might remember from last week, we talked a lot about background stuff, and we talked about the Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish. And in the Enuma Elish, you have two gods, the freshwater god and the saltwater god. They're married and they have some kids, and their kids are loud and noisy. So the male god says, hey, let's kill our children. And the female god, because she's a good mom, she says no. And so one of the children kills dad. And then later, one of the children kills mom. Now, these are the children. Then the Lord, Marduk, that's the false god in the Babylonian creation story, paused to view her dead body. He's looking at his dead ancestor, Tiamat, and he says this, he's looking at her dead body that he might divide the monster and do artful works. He split her like a shellfish into two parts. Half of her he set up and sealed it as the sky, pulled down the bar and posted guards. He bade them to allow not her waters to escape. And so in other creation stories, you have gods fighting, killing, and dying, and then their bodies are used to create the heavens and the earth. What did your God use to create the heavens and the earth? His word. All he used was his word, because his power over creation is absolute. He says there's going to be a sky, and the sky says, yes, Lord. There's going to be an ocean, and the ocean says, yes, Lord. And here are your boundaries. And they say, yes. You don't see the sea like taking over the sky, or the sky the sea, unless you're on drugs or in science fiction. I don't know. God is the absolute master of creation. So on the third day, God says, hey, land. And so now we have land and sea and sky. And then he creates plants, all of these things according to their kinds. And you see the repetition. God said, and there was. God saw, it is good. God separated. He creates all of these different boundaries, and he names what he owns. The framework theory suggests that what we see here is God creating the realms of existence for things that are going to populate those realms. On the first day, you have light and darkness. What are you going to have on the fourth day? Sun and moon and stars. On the second day, you have sky and sea. What do you see on the fifth day? On the fifth day, you see the inhabitants of the sea and the sky. On the third day, you see the land. On the sixth day, you see creatures of the land. And so God is taking the unformed and unfilled world, and he is forming and filling it in a logical order, not necessarily a chronological order. Any theology of creation has to teach that God is the absolute sovereign over creation. He is absolute. There is no part of the created world that exists apart from his power. He creates, he evaluates, he names. There are 3 days and 3 realms created by the power of God, but each of these realms still needs to be filled. How does the idea of God's mastery over creation? And so I'm moving into, okay, the so what factor. Okay, so yeah, we're really comfortable with the idea that God is the absolute master of creation. Yeah. We know all that. Do we? Do we stop to pause and reflect about it? Do we stop? I really do believe that writing things down is important for us as Christians. Even if it's just a few things, a little bit of details about the day. It doesn't have to be like a huge devotional kind of a thing, but just that we make some notes about how things are going so we can look back and see God's faithfulness. I think in our prayer times, we need to be intentional about praising God, specific for who he is and what he's done for us. Yes. God is the absolute master of creation. Man, when you get your second or third cup of coffee, that's one of those things where you wake up and you're like, wow. And when you think about it from the perspective of people who have lost their way and lost their idea about God, and they're confused about the gods around them, man, that sort of sounds like people around us right now. People who are chasing after ideas and false gods and false fulfillment. And maybe everything that's going on in the world right now is not just, it is chaos,
Yeah.
but it also has a purpose to get our attention and to focus back on God. So I think this is an important idea. And so set aside some reflective time and just thank God for what he's made. Thank God that there's order in the universe and not just chaos. One of the things that one of the theological ideas in the days of creation is the idea of rest. That's coming up. So I'm sort of hinting at something that's coming. There is a theology of rest built into the days of creation, because you know what? We need a break. We're human. We grow, we get frail, we get old, we have all kinds of problems. We need rest too. And so as you journal and as you pray this week, I want you to just take a minute to step back and say, wow, God, you created everything that there is. The divine creator forms and fills all of the creation. Let's look at verse 14 of chapter 1. And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. Let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, let the waters teem with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And so here we see in the next 3 days of creation, God created light and darkness, and God created the inhabitants of light and darkness. God created the sea and the sky. God creates the inhabitants of the sea and the sky. And then the same thing happens for the land. God created the realm of light and darkness, and now he places the appropriate things there. Now, what's fascinating about this, when you step back into the ancient world and when you think about those Jewish people on the side of the Red Sea, they just came out of Egypt. Who were the gods of Egypt? The sun and the moon and the stars. And you know, the stars, like in the text, you know what's great about the text? The stars are almost an afterthought. Oh yeah, he put the great light and the lesser light and the stars. It's amazing to me. Victor Hamilton, in his commentary on Genesis, says this: it is sufficient to recall the proliferation of astral deities in most Mediterranean religions. The sun, the moon, and the stars are divine. So there are all these, like, if a Jew was to go talk to somebody from Babylon, one of the questions that would be asked is, hey, who's your God? You know, or hey, we're going to go pray because it's almost sunrise, and we're going to pray to the sun. And what is the Jewish guy going to say? My God made that. That's a thing. Why would I pray to a thing? That's ridiculous. And so Moses, one of the things that he also does here is he avoids the common names for sun and moon. He calls it the greater light and the lesser light, and he does it on purpose because the names for sun and the name for moon sound like the names for those deities that were worshipped by other religions. God doesn't create lesser gods. There's no main God and then gods under the main God and then gods under them. Nope, that's not the way God works. God is the direct, sovereign creator of everything. God gives a purpose. So God establishes, hey, sun, you're going to be in the sky. You're going to rule over the light, and your purpose is to mark days. And the sun says, yes, Lord. And moon, you're going to be in the night, and your purpose is to mark months. And the moon says, yes, Lord, because God is the absolute master of creation. And so there's a slight but obvious critique of all these other astral religions. You look at day 5, the 5th picture corresponding to the 2nd day, and God created the realm of sea and sky, and now he populates the realm with the appropriate creatures according to their kinds. Now, there are still good reasons. I used to be in the Navy a long time ago, and the ocean is gigantic. It's hard to even imagine how big the ocean is and how terrifying it could be for ancient peoples. It's still pretty scary. I can remember when I was in the service, the ship had a long cargo deck. It was about a football field, and you could literally stand at one end of this and watch the ship as it flexed as the waves hit it. It's a 40,000-ton oiler. It's a big boat, and it's flexing and bending because of the enormity of the sea. The sea was the place where chaos reigned, where the sea monsters live, and God created the sea monsters. In Ugaritic mythology, the creator god Anat has to fight against the sea monster. In the Babylonian myth, Tiamat has to be killed by Marduk, a lesser god. In Genesis, God makes them and places them in their place and commands them to fill the oceans. The great big sea monsters that all of the other ancient cultures were afraid of are bath toys in God's bathtub. They're the rubber duckies. That's how powerful your God is. And so what Moses is doing is he's taking these people who are just beat down and crushed and oppressed and carrying all this weight of who are we? And he reminds them, you are the servants of the one true God who created everything. He formed and filled the entire world around you. On the 6th day, God creates the realm of the land, and now he populates the realm with creatures according to their kind. And God said, and there was, and it was good. You know, I'm sorry. I forgot. I was going to try and tell a joke, but it didn't. Bounced off my head. Sorry. God forms and fills all the realms of the earth. The heavens are created and filled by God's command. The sea, the sky, and the land are also formed and filled by God. Step into that community who've just come out of Egypt, just come out of slavery in Egypt. Who are the gods of Egypt? Sun gods, sky gods, moon gods. They have a cow goddess. They have a frog goddess, a crocodile god, a lioness. You name it, they probably have it. Chaos surrounded them. Victor Hamilton says the theological battle of Moses' day centered around belief in one God, who is himself uncreated, merciful, and sovereign, versus the belief in multiple gods and demons who are impulsive, unpredictable, and often immoral. And so Moses, in this remarkable, compact picture, he says, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, your God created all of it. God creates the light, and he creates the inhabitants of the light. God creates everything according to his power. Your God made it all. There's a lot of chaos in the modern world. Some of it is natural, some of it is man-made. The world is damaged by sin. We all know these stories. These are old things for us as Christians. We can also see the goodness and the order in the world around us. When we planted a garden this year, I planted corn, and corn grew. Do you know why? Because that's how God made the world. If I had planted corn and harvested asparagus, like how that would be a vengeful God, right? Depending on how you feel about asparagus. Order is important, and God is the one who orders the world. Have you ever opened up your dryer and found perfectly folded laundry? It doesn't happen, because we also have to order the world around us. Now, one of the things I often recommend in a counseling situation, when you feel like the world is chaotic and out of control, put something in order. clean your room, clean your car. And by putting something in order, you are establishing your space. God is establishing his world as a world of order. It sort of mirrors God when we do those kind of things. And in our thanksgiving to God, let's thank God for order. In our practical lives, we can order our spaces and exert control over chaos. The divine creator establishes the boundaries and fills the realm of creation. Oh, look, this is my picture of order right here. Taking your breakfast bowl apart. The divine creator creates his image. Take a look at verse 26. Then God said, now what are you expecting? I'm sorry, let me pause. What are you expecting right here? Because up until now, then God said, let the earth bring forth. Or then God said, let there be. So you have an expectation. Okay, if you were hearing this for the first time, then God said, let us make man in our image. Now, wait a minute. Okay, I realize I'm riffing here a little bit, but everything else was created according to its kind. According to its kind, according to its kind, livestock, living creatures according to their kinds. Let us make man in our image after our likeness. It's different. You're different. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over the livestock and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth and every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. You are created different from the animals. You are created special. You are created in the image of God. When we're expecting him to say, let there be man, then that would make us equal to the animals. But he says, let us make man in our image. Of all the animals and plants that are made, you are distinct. You're made in the image of God. And I chose this image intentionally. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. You are made in the image of God, period, full stop. That's what you're made as, God's image. Right. And you don't have to disagree. If you disagree with that, you're not disagreeing with me. You're disagreeing with the Bible. Yeah. So best of luck with that. You are more than an animal. A lot of our animal rights friends who love animals very dearly want to elevate animals to be equal in creation with God, but they're just not. You are created in the image of God. You are made to rule over the earth itself. You're made to rule over. And so God, he created you to be a vice regent. He gave you the authority, and he will hold you accountable for your stewardship of the earth. You are made for dominion. Dominion is rule. And so God's going to give you the right to do certain things or to be certain things. My dog belongs to me, but I'm also responsible for her care. God provides food for his creation, and it was very good. It was very good. The work of creation on the seventh day is finished. God rested. He's not tired. He's just done with the work. The work of creation is very good. It's finished. And he blessed that day and made it holy. He set apart that seventh day on purpose because he wanted us to understand that work is not the only thing that we have as our existence. The ancient creation, the other creation mythologies said, yeah, the gods made you to work and feed them. That's what other people in the ancient world were saying. Yeah, the gods made mankind, so they wouldn't have to work very hard. You're just made to work. And they would work people literally to death. You're not made just to be a working thing. You're also made to be a resting thing. To rest in God's power, God's sovereignty, God's creation. The work of creation is finished. And you'll notice in the last day, there's no evening and morning formula. The creation is complete. God doesn't have to keep working. The work is finished. Now, that doesn't mean we, of course, believe that God is sustaining his creation, that he is intimately involved in everything that he's made. But when we think about the days of creation theologically, now what I've taught you is the framework theory. The first day is the realm of light and darkness. The fourth day is the inhabitants of that realm. And so you just sort of see that that's a panel, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then the peak of that creation is mankind. You and I are created and placed at the peak of that creation to be God's vice regents. And so when we think about the theology of this, the days of creation teach a distinction between the creator and what is created. God creates by his word. He doesn't fight. He says, and it is. That was a bombshell in the ancient world. There is an absolute mastery of God over everything that he's made. Mankind has a special place as God's vice regent. In the ancient world, this too was not the kind of thing that you told the man on the street. You told the man on the street, yeah, the gods made the king. The kings are created in God's image. You're just a schlub whose job is to just keep working. Oh, you're sick? You don't get any sick days. Oh, you're about to die? That's okay. We'll get another dude. The Hebrew people, the Jewish people, had a special view of their place and their creation. The seventh day was set aside as a day of rest. These former slaves were given a picture of what a week was supposed to look like. Even God worked 6 days and took a day of rest, relaxation, restoration. Man, don't we need a day of rest?
Yeah.
We do. I find sometimes in my own life that it's like I just keep working and working and working. And it's like, you know what? I need a day where I don't do anything intentionally. I need a day where I unplug and stop reading and stop trying to get things done and just, that's a technical term. So what are the days of creation theologically? They're supposed to teach you the place of God as absolute sovereign, your place as vice regent. The creation is something God has absolute mastery over. What are the days of creation historically? Now, there are some churches and some people who believe that you must believe in young earth creationism. Some churches even put it in their doctrinal statement. One of my good friends, probably several of them, but one that I know about, has in their church's foundational documents that you must believe in young earth creationism. United Brethren, we don't do that. And there are a lot of ancient creeds, and even our creed in the denomination, we don't require that someone believe something specific about the days of creation. The Apostles' Creed says this: I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. And it stops right there. And so as a Christian, I think that's sort of a minimum belief. Like, obviously we have to believe that God created. How did he do it? Well, we can disagree. The UB confession reads like this: in the name of God, we declare and confess before men that we believe in the only true God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, that these three are one, the Father and the Son and the Father, and the Holy Ghost equal in essence or being with both. That this triune God created the heavens and the earth and all that in them is, visible as well as invisible. And furthermore, he sustains, governs, protects, and supports the same. So we don't get tied up in things that are in the shallow end. And so in these four main interpretive options, there's the gap theory, the day-age theory, a literal or a young earth creationism, and then the framework theory. You can believe any of them, okay? There would be tensions if you tried to believe all of them, but you can believe any of them and still be a Christian. When I think about the days of creation, I think the days of creation really establish where you are. theologically in the world. And it's the same thing as when you take a map and show a truck driver, okay, you are here. This is where you are. This is how you get from here where you are to where you want to be or where you're supposed to be. Moses is reminding the Jewish people that their God created and ordered everything and placed mankind, the man on the street, the guy selling hotcakes, that guy, as a vice regent, as a co-regent over the creation. You are created in God's image. And because you're created in God's image, you image God to other people. You demonstrate compassion. You show forth love. Of the framework theory, Henry Blocher says this: the author's intention is not to supply us with a chronology of origins. It is possible that the logical order he has chosen coincides broadly with the actual sequence of the facts of the creation of the world, but that does not interest him. For most of the time, I am a young earth creationist because I believe in the absolute power of God. Can God do it in 6 days? He went from nothing to everything. 6 days is cake. He could have done it in 6 seconds. Do I believe that people who are not young earth creationists are somehow less Christian than I am? No, I can't believe that. I believe that the framework theory truly represents what is happening in the text of Genesis. It's a logical, not a chronological order. Some things I don't know. How old is the earth? I don't know.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows, absolutely. Do I know that God created everything? Yeah. Do I know that he ordered and filled the creation? Oh, absolutely. Am I so thankful that when I plant corn, I don't get asparagus? Praise Jesus. What Genesis teaches is an important starting point upon which we build a distinctly Christian view of the world. And there's a lot of confusion and chaos around us right now.
Right.
And so I think we as Christians have a calling and a responsibility to just first and foremost, how we think about the world and people in it is to take a step back and just realize, hey, God, you've got this. You are still the God of creation who creates and orders. And if there's anything that's messed up, it's probably us. And so, Lord, help us to figure out where we've gone wrong and come back around to do what's right. I think that the first step in all of this is to think about where we are and to think about our creation and to thank God for it. And then to order our lives in such a way that we are respecting and honoring and knowing a theology of rest, because we get too busy. To turn off the screens, to step away from the desk, and just to rest. To watch the kids be silly in the yard, to enjoy little bonfires, to enjoy good fellowship and good companionship. We lose out on a theology of rest if we get too tied up in what's happening in the chronologies and the days and all those things that the text was never really intended to address. And so I hope this challenges your thinking a little bit.